My husband and I had a miscarriage in September of 2018, and maybe about a full month after, I still just felt very bloated and off. I just kept thinking that the symptoms were my body bouncing back. So not only I was having the bloating, but I was having some pain. And by the time I left work that evening, I could not walk. I was home that day, though, when my husband didn't call me and I heard him pull in the driveway. And I was like, that's really unusual. He came in the house and he said, the doctor called and you have cancer and you have small cell ovarian cancer. Often with ovarian cancer, you feel the symptoms, they always say they whisper. But I felt like we almost really didn't get the time to grieve that loss because it was just into one thing, into the next. I had a very small lump on my abdomen that normally wasn't there. And so I just kind of mentioned it to my husband, who is a nurse, and I said, we probably should just watch this. And we just kind of didn't think twice about it after that. And then pretty much exactly a month after that, I still just was feeling bloated and really just off and even tired. And one day I was at work decorating for my job, and I was going up and down a ladder, and I had mentioned to my coworker that I just really felt like pain was starting to happen in my abdomen. So not only I was having the bloating, but I was having some pain. And by the time I left work that evening, I could not walk. So I was like hunched over walking. I had called my doctor in the afternoon, my general GP, to get an appointment to be seen because I knew something was off then when I was having that pain and I couldn't stand up straight. So I ended up seeing my doctor the next day, and she was doing an abdominal exam, and she pushed on my lower right side of my abdomen, kind of, where your ovary is, and I had severe pain. So I kind of, shot up and shrieked a little bit, and she's like, oh, you are probably needing your appendix removed. And so she sent me over to the ER. And so they did a CT scan. The ER doctor had looked at the scan and said that I had a large intestinal mass. And so we just were really in shock. And a new set of doctors came in the room. And the doctor had said, that she would be taking out my ovary. And so I stopped her and I'm like, why would you need to take my ovary, if it's a mass on my intestines? She then said that they re-looked at my scan and the mass was actually a large 14 centimeter mass on my right ovary. And there was, that they had looked at it incorrectly at first. And so that I would be having surgery the next day at that hospital. And so that was the day before Thanksgiving that I would have surgery. I do want to mention that they, after I had my miscarriage, they had checked, and did a scan and knew that nothing was off with any, everything, all the tests after the miscarriage was coming back normal. And so they knew this tumor grew within 60 days. And so that was also really concerning then, knowing that this tumor grew that quickly. I almost wasn't really scared, but my first thing to the doctor was that I wanted to save my other ovary so we could have a chance to have, a family if we chose to do that in the future. I had PCOS, so I figured maybe, I was hoping that it wasn't really a cancerous tumor. I was hoping it was just, something going on with my PCOS. So I think at the time I really wasn't scared, and I thought, oh, there's no way like something could grow that fast that's cancerous. Thankfully, my doctor ended up doing my surgery, my gynecologist. I felt really safe with him, and I felt like, he would do anything that he could for me in the best interest. And so, you know, we had a great relationship. And so he just really brought like a peace to me. And he checked in before the surgery and he's like, I'll try to save, you know, your ovary, but this one is really big. Like, I am concerned about that. But, you know, I'll do the best that I can. He did end up checking on me after the surgery. And he said, you know, that the surgery went a lot longer than he was thinking it was going to, because I ended up bleeding into my abdomen. And so he had done an extra wash, and I could tell by his eyes. He said, you know, Brooke, I am concerned that it is cancer. He's like, we don't know for sure until we get the pathology back, but this is something I haven't seen before. So that was another kind of unusual thing about my story, is we're a smaller community hospital. And so my doctor said, there is a little problem. We know it's cancer. We just don't know what kind right now. The two systems that tested it aren't agreeing with what it is. So we're going to have to retest it. So it's going to be another 2 weeks. At that point, I was back to work, busy, which maybe was a good thing to keep my mind not thinking about cancer. But ultimately, my husband was the one that found out what kind of cancer I had. And I was, you know, definitely okay with that. I had shared with my doctor that he could contact either of us to give the news. And so I was home that day, though, when my husband didn't call me, and I heard him pull in the driveway. And I was like, that's really unusual. He always calls me, and he knew I was home. And I heard, you know, like I said, I heard him pull in the driveway, and honestly, my heart sank, because then I knew something was wrong. He came in the house and he said, you know, the doctor called and you have cancer. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, you have small cell ovarian cancer. He said, our doctor said we're getting transferred right away because they've never seen this before, and it's really serious, and we have to move fast. And so at that point, that's when we were really scared, and we really took it hard then. We do what everyone does when you don't know what something is. We Googled it, and within a few minutes, we had to put our phones away because we're like, ooh, you know, it just made our heart sink even more. I do remember the phone calls with my parents, especially. My dad is a very joking, very carefree guy, and hearing him cry, one of the hardest times I've ever heard him cry, was really hard. Telling my two sisters, my younger sister had cancer 6 months before I did, and so in a gynecologic cancer. And then I had a twin sister that had a gynecologic cancer that was treated by surgery, but my younger sister did have to do chemo. My doctor feels like there is something genetically, but they don't know at this point. They haven't found a link yet. But my twin does have SMARCA4, and I also have SMARCA4. But he feels like there's also another genetic link out there that just hasn't been discovered yet. She ended up doing a lot of research as well, and she found a Facebook group of the small cell ovarian cancer, group on Facebook, and also a foundation it was a website that was out there put on by two parents that had lost their daughter Stephanie to small cell. But between those two things, that brought us hope. But my twin sister Brittany did talk to several people in the Facebook group, and they all recommended this doctor in Cincinnati, Dr. Pressey. And so we kind of said that we would go to Dr. Pressey if needed. With my local doctor, he had helped kind of guide who to go to in our state. And so we ended up going to someone, that he recommended. I remember the night before, and, especially we were discussing what would be our main things that we would decide if we were going to go with this doctor or to seek that second opinion with Dr. Pressey. And we pretty much said, it all depends on how many patients he's had of small cell. Ovarian cancer tends to, I feel, get just lumped together. And small cell is very different than the typical high grade, the other type of cancers for ovarian. And so we just knew that we needed someone that at least had one other patient that had small cell. And so that was kind of our main question. Luckily, Cody had talked with Dr. Pressey on the phone the evening before we went to our first official oncology appointment. And so Dr. Pressey kind of said that, they had found that a 6-type drug chemo with second look surgery, high PET chemo, and possibly radiation was the best way to beat small cell. And so we're like, okay, we're going to take it to this other doctor. But the oncologist that we saw did not have any experience with small cell. And he suggested, the typical treatment for ovarian cancer, the 2-type drug chemo, and a hysterectomy. And so we kind of asked if he would speak to Dr. Pressey and kind of explain and kind of go over things. And he wasn't even willing to talk to him. And so we pretty much told the doctor, he had grabbed the surgery binder because he's like, you have to have surgery. You have to. And if you do this treatment, you can pass away from it. It's so toxic. And I remember saying, yeah, it sounds like it is, but I have one life and I'm going to do the best I can to keep living. He wasn't really understanding, I feel, to our opinion. And so anyways, he went to grab the surgery binder and he left the room, and Cody looked at me and said, we're not going here, Brooke. We're going to go see Dr. Pressey. And so they came back in the room and we just kind of said, well, we're not scheduling surgery, but we'll get back to you, basically if we're interested in contacting you. And we never spoke with them again. And so we immediately called Dr. Pressey's office after we left the doctor, and they got us scheduled within a week. Cody said those exact words, like, I want you with me. We were worried about insurance. He kind of said, we'll worry about that later. I was worried about his job and my job and how we were going to afford going back and forth and, our dog and having a home and all those things. And he just kind of said, we'll figure it out because this is where we need to go for you to survive. Treatment would be every 3 weeks. But Dr. Pressey did say, it is not unusual at all for you to get a little off schedule because infections are going to happen or blood transfusions will be needed. And I really appreciated that he was very open to that and telling us what typically has happened. So, each time that happened, it wasn't a huge surprise. So basically, I had 2 rounds of chemo, basically about a month apart. And then around 2, I remember losing all my hair. And then also I got my stem cells collected after round 2. And then did 2 more rounds. And then after round 4, I had high PET chemo. And that, I believe I needed about a month and a half recovery from. And then had 2 more rounds of chemo. So they're all inpatient over 3 days is how each round would happen. And then after round 6, I had about a month off. And then I had my stem cell transplant. And so I was in the hospital for 30 days after that. Dr. Pressey had explained that he really thought a stem cell transplant was really important. There was maybe some mixed opinions out there in the small cell world of a stem cell. But he just basically said that he really felt that the stem cell was really important, really to just kind of coordinate everything together and just have that final step to have it not come back. Because often with small cell, the recurrence rate is really high. We were very open with Dr. Pressey and his team that we did want to have a family. Unfortunately, they did feel that we didn't have time to like freeze eggs or anything like that. But, we were kind of hoping that if I didn't test positive for the gene, that I possibly would have that other ovary, and Dr. Pressey, like I said, was open that there was a high chance that other ovary wouldn't work, but that there is other avenues that we could go if we wanted to talk about a family afterwards. But after round 4, I did find out then that I was positive for the gene. And so that did just kind of change a lot of things in our life plans, I guess. We were hoping that maybe even adoption would be an option. We did go that route for a little bit, and it didn't work out with a certain situation. And so that was really hard. I think especially after the failed adoption, that is when I just kind of knew for my own heart that I had to kind of protect that, and that maybe it just wasn't going to work out for me to be a parent with Cody that way. I think that's something that I think I'll always kind of struggle with. I don't maybe like the word taken away, but I feel like we should have still been able to have that option. But we had great support from the medical team, and they were very kind about it. Dr. Pressey says year 2 is a big one. So after 2 years cancer-free, I just was like, wow, I can't believe it. And then, 5 years cancer-free, I still am like, wow, I can't believe it. And now 7, it just almost seems unreal. But I stay really busy in my life. I love going on trips with Cody and, friends or family. We love going to concerts. Some people in my life, they're like, I don't know how you work full time. And then you're doing all the things on your calendar. Like, I would be tired. I don't know how you're not tired. And I am tired. But, I feel like I'm so blessed and thankful to be alive today. And so I just want to have as much fun as I can. And so one thing I really try to do too is be a voice for ovarian cancer, especially small cell and younger women with ovarian cancer, because I feel it's, really important so people don't feel alone. There's definitely days where I get tired and I work full time and I'm busy, but I think I have been trying to navigate resting more when I need to. And, just being active when I can, eating healthy. But, I have like abdominal issues, especially from high PET chemo. I think that really affected it. I have a large belly button hernia and a few hernias in my abdomen that eventually I will have surgery on. And I still have my uterus. So I will be getting a hysterectomy as well. But Dr. Pressey feels it's not something I have to do right now. And I'm thankful that I kind of still have time to like process it and heal. But on an average, I'm very proud of my body. The Brooke then kind of seems like a different person. I feel like life has a lot of ups and downs, but it's all about creating memories and being with the people that you love. And I'm so thankful for that. One thing that has been a little hard with small cell is I've lost a lot of friends that have passed away from small cell, but I also feel that they would want me to keep going too, and to be that voice for our group and the community. On the days where I feel that I, miss them, or I feel so sad, for the people that they love, I also feel honored to be here, and I feel like I'll never let their memory go. and that I'm always going to make sure that everybody remembers them. My favorite advice that I have ever received is to take one day at a time or a step at a time. Because I think sometimes we all just kind of take things so overwhelming. But if you kind of think of life as just a moment as at a time, and that, life can be really hard, but it can be really beautiful too. And to just keep going so you can have those beautiful moments.